She thought her mother abandoned her 20 years ago, until a customer dropped his wallet. Inside was a photo of the woman Riley lost as a child, in Keanu Reeves' hands. Why did he have it? And what secret had been buried all this time? What Riley uncovered next will leave you speechless. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The morning started like any other at the Bluebird Cafe, a sleepy corner diner tucked between a laundromat and a hardware store in Brooklyn. Riley Ward wiped down booth 9 with practiced ease, her movements quick and quiet. It was just past 7. The morning rush hadn't hit yet. The smell of burnt toast, strong coffee, and rain on pavement filled the air. She tugged her apron tight around her waist and glanced up at the door as the bell jingled. A man stepped in, tall, a bit hunched from the cold, wearing a beanie pulled low and a worn gray jacket. His beard was patchy, flecked with silver. Sunglasses clung to his collar, but she could see his eyes, dark and calm. He looked like someone trying not to be noticed, but something about him made Riley stare a second longer than she meant to. He slid into booth 9 without a word, resting his hands quietly on the Formica table. Riley walked over with a coffee pot, her steps slow, almost cautious. "Morning," she said, pouring the coffee without asking. "Want a menu?" He shook his head. "Just oatmeal, no sugar. And, if you have blueberries, that'd be great." His voice was soft but deliberate, familiar in the strangest way. Riley nodded, coming right up. She turned toward the counter, but her thoughts were already racing. There was something about that man's face, his presence. He wasn't just anyone passing through. Rico, the line cook, peeked through the kitchen window. "Who's the movie star?" he whispered with a smirk. Riley shrugged. "He just wants oatmeal." Back at booth 9, the man sat quietly, stirring his coffee with a spoon he hadn't used. Riley set down the oatmeal in front of him, garnished with a scoop of blueberries. He looked up and gave a small smile. "Thanks." "You're welcome," she replied, clearing her throat. You, passing through?" He paused, then reached into his back pocket for a wallet. As he opened it, something slipped free. A small photograph, old and worn, drifting to the table like a leaf. Riley instinctively reached out to grab it, and froze. The woman in the photo had dark auburn hair swept into a soft bun, green eyes shining under glasses, and a slight, knowing smile. A woman in a sunflower print dress Riley hadn't seen in 20 years. Her mother. Her breath caught. Her hand trembled as she held the photo in the air, staring at it like it was impossible. "Where did you—" Before she could finish, the man gently took it back. His eyes met hers for the first time, and he offered a soft nod. "Thanks. Didn't mean to drop that." Riley's voice vanished. Her thoughts raced. That photo, that smile. She wanted to scream or cry or run, but all she could do was nod back. He tucked the photo away like it was nothing. He didn't recognize her, but Riley would never forget him, or the photo that had just shattered everything she thought she knew. Riley backed away from the booth slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. The photo, the very same photo she had dreamed about for years, had just fallen out of a stranger's wallet. A stranger who ordered blueberries and oatmeal like it was just another Tuesday. She ducked behind the counter, trying to collect herself. Her hands were still shaking. She reached for the side of the napkin dispenser and leaned on it, breathing through her nose. Think. Don't lose it, not here. Celeste Ward, her mother, had vanished when Riley was 6. One day she was there, singing old Fleetwood Mac songs while folding laundry, and the next she was gone. No note, no signs of a struggle, no forwarding address. Just empty drawers and silence. Her father had never been the same, and neither had she. She dared a glance back at booth 9. The man was sipping his coffee, looking out the window like he was miles away. How did he have that photo? Where did he get it? Riley knew every version of that picture. It was from her mother's last birthday. Her Aunt June had taken it. There were only 2 copies, and Riley had the other one locked in a shoebox under her bed. Rico leaned through the kitchen pass window again. "Everything okay out there?" Riley lied. "All good." She stepped out from behind the counter and forced herself back toward the booth. Her voice was barely steady. "Sorry about that. I thought I recognized the woman in that photo." He looked up again, raising an eyebrow. "You did?" She nodded. "She looks a lot like someone I used to know." He studied her for a beat longer, then said, "She meant a lot to someone I used to know, too." The words were vague, but they landed like a brick. Riley stood frozen, unsure what to say. He didn't elaborate, just returned to his oatmeal like it was the most normal thing in the world. She watched him for another second, then walked away. Her mind was spinning. What did that mean? She retreated to the back hallway, near the employee lockers, and pulled out her phone. She opened her photo gallery and scrolled until she found it. The exact same photo. Same dress. Same smile. Same creases in the corner. There was no way it was coincidence. She zoomed in on her mother's eyes. Riley's eyes. Back in the dining room, the man placed a 20 on the table and stood. He nodded at her on his way out. "Thanks for the coffee." And then he left, the door chime echoing behind him. Riley stood still for a long moment, the buzz of the diner fading into silence in her mind. She wasn't imagining it. That man knew something. And now, she had to find out what. Riley tossed her apron into the locker and clocked out 15 minutes early. Her thoughts were no longer in the Bluebird Cafe. They were with that photograph. That man. That moment. Her sneakers hit the cracked sidewalk as she hurried outside, scanning the street. The sidewalk was mostly empty. A delivery truck idled at the corner, and a dog walker passed by with earbuds in. But the man, Keanu, was gone. She turned the corner and caught a glimpse of him ahead. He moved like he wasn't in a rush, but there was purpose in his steps. She followed from a distance, staying just far enough behind to avoid suspicion. What was she doing? She wasn't even sure. Her instincts had taken over. The man turned down a quieter street lined with brownstones and sparse trees. Riley ducked behind a lamppost when he paused to tie his boot. Then he disappeared into a small storefront. A used bookstore wedged between a laundromat and a tailor's shop. Its faded sign read, "Truman and Sons, Rare Finds and First Editions." She approached carefully, peeking through the window. He was inside, speaking with the clerk. Then he wandered toward the philosophy section, fingers lightly brushing the spines of old hardcovers. Riley hesitated. She could barge in and confront him, demand to know why he had that photo, who gave it to him, what it meant. But something stopped her. Instead, she stepped back and walked away. Back at her apartment, Riley shut the door and leaned against it, still clutching her phone. She pulled out the old shoebox from under her bed and opened it. The familiar smell of old paper and time met her nose. There it was. The photo. Her mother's photo. The same one, and in the corner, the small, almost invisible ink inscription. The TCW. "All my stars belong to you." TCW. Her father? No. His name was Matt. She had never figured out who the initials belonged to. She placed the 2 photos side by side, her phone's screenshot and the real one. The crease patterns were identical, but the copy from Keanu's wallet looked newer, less faded, like it had been better preserved. She tried searching his name online. She already knew who he was, of course, everyone did. But none of the search results connected him to Celeste Ward. No articles, no interviews, nothing. She tried searching Celeste's name with new keywords: Keanu Reeves, Ward disappearance, CW plus photo. Nothing. But something about his expression when he looked at that photo. It wasn't casual. It wasn't random. Riley stared at her screen. This man had walked into her life out of nowhere and brought with him a truth she didn't know how to reach. But she would. Tomorrow morning, she'd be waiting at the bookstore. She wasn't going to let this trail disappear like her mother had. Not again. The photo haunted her. Riley sat alone in her bedroom. The picture burned into her memory like a brand. She'd only seen it for 2 seconds, maybe less, but that was all it took. Her mother's face, clear as day, staring up from the worn edge of a black and white photo in a stranger's wallet. Except the man hadn't really been a stranger. It was Keanu Reeves. She could still feel the chill that gripped her spine when she saw it. The smooth, weathered leather wallet, the moment the photo slipped from its folds, and then that jolt in her chest, as if the universe had cracked open for just a second and whispered something she wasn't ready to hear. Now, alone in the small apartment she shared with her cat and too many books, Riley clutched an old photo of her mother from her childhood. It was one of the few she had left. Celeste Ward, the soft-eyed librarian with a voice like velvet and an uncanny ability to guess exactly what story Riley needed most. She closed her eyes and remembered the last time she saw her. It had been raining, that kind of Brooklyn drizzle that clung to everything. Riley was 6, standing on the stoop of her grandmother's house with her arms wrapped around her favorite stuffed bear. Her mother knelt down, zipped Riley's jacket, and kissed her forehead. Celeste had smiled, tired but loving, and said, "I'll be back before dinner, sweet pea. You be good for Grandma, all right?" She never came back. They told Riley her mother left, walked away. No notes, no explanation, just gone. At first, Riley refused to believe it. She sat by the front window for days, convinced Celeste would round the corner any minute. But days turned into months. Her grandmother said Celeste had probably gotten in over her head. "Your mama was always a dreamer. One day she just floated away." Now, at 26, Riley had accepted the story. Or at least she'd convinced herself she had. Until this morning. Until that moment in the diner. Until she saw her mother's face in Keanu Reeves's wallet. She turned on her laptop, typing Keanu Reeves Celeste Ward into the search bar. Nothing. She tried again. Keanu Reeves librarian, Brooklyn disappearance. Still nothing. She scoured pages of fan blogs, movie trivia, Reddit forums. No mention of her mother's name. No connection between the actor and a woman who vanished 2 decades ago. She leaned back, frustration bubbling beneath her skin. The internet had answers for everything, except the only one that mattered to her. Just then, her phone buzzed. "Ellie, you okay? You dipped after work like a ghost." Riley stared at the message. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. She didn't know how to explain it. How do you tell someone that you might have just seen proof your mother didn't abandon you? That she was somehow connected to one of the most famous men in the world? She replied with 3 words. "Need to talk." Ellie arrived 20 minutes later, still in her nurse scrubs and clutching a bag of takeout. She dropped it on the coffee table without saying a word, looked Riley over, then sat cross-legged on the couch like she was bracing for impact. "So," Ellie finally said. "What happened?" Riley sat beside her, still holding the old photo of her mother. She passed it to Ellie. "You remember this picture, right?" Ellie nodded. "Yeah, your mom. I've seen it 100 times. I saw this same photo today, at work. It fell out of Keanu Reeves's wallet." Ellie blinked. "Wait, what?" "I'm serious." Riley's voice wavered. "He came into the diner, sat at booth 9, quiet, polite, low-key. He opened his wallet to pay, and that photo, my mom's photo, slipped out." Ellie stared at her. "You sure it was the same one?" "I'm sure," Riley said firmly. Same lab coat, same braid, same look in her eyes. Ellie was silent for a moment, processing. Then, "Okay. That's weird, but maybe she worked on a movie set?" Maybe she was an extra and he kept a photo? People collect strange things. She was a librarian, Riley said quietly. She never worked in film. And this wasn't some random fan photo. It was old, folded, worn around the edges, like something he's carried for years. Ellie slowly shook her head. That doesn't make any sense. I know, Riley whispered, but it's real. I saw it. They sat in silence. The hum of traffic filtered in through the apartment window. Somewhere below, a bus rumbled by, and a dog barked in the distance. Finally, Ellie asked the question Riley had been avoiding. Do you think your mom knew him? Riley's throat tightened. I don't know what to think, but I can't stop seeing that picture. She looked the same, just older than I remember. Alive. Ellie leaned back on the couch. Maybe there's a logical explanation. Maybe your mom left and changed her name. Maybe Keanu Reeves is just involved somehow. Maybe she worked for someone he knew. Or maybe everything I was told was a lie, Riley said. Maybe she didn't leave me. Maybe she was taken or hiding. And he knows why. It's a lot of maybes, Ellie said gently. You could be chasing a coincidence. I've lived with coincidence my whole life. This feels different. Ellie sighed and reached for the takeout bag. All right, what's your plan? You gonna confront him? I don't even know where he went, Riley admitted. He paid, said thank you, and left. Ellie popped open the box of fries. Well, if you're going to go full detective, you're gonna need fuel. Riley smiled faintly. I already searched online. No connections, no articles, no mentions. Ellie handed her a fry. Then we dig deeper. But promise me something, okay? What's that you're ready for whatever you find, even if it's not what you want to hear. Riley nodded slowly. I just want the truth. That night, Riley couldn't sleep. The photo burned behind her eyelids every time she closed them. She lay on her side, staring at the ceiling. Her bedroom quiet, except for the soft hum of the radiator kicking in and out. The shadows in the room shifted with the headlights passing outside, but her mind was stuck in the past. Back to the last day she saw her mother. She had been 6 years old. It was a rainy Wednesday. Her mom had picked her up early from school and taken her for hot chocolate at a corner cafe, the kind with mismatched mugs and board games missing half their pieces. They played Candyland for the 100th time, and her mom let her win. Again. Afterward, they walked home under a shared umbrella, Celeste humming a lullaby that Riley couldn't remember the name of now, only the melody. When they reached the small duplex they shared with Riley's grandmother, her mother knelt down, pulled the hood of Riley's raincoat tighter and said, I have to go somewhere for a little while, baby. Grandma's gonna take care of you tonight. Where are you going? Riley had asked. Just to the library, her mom had said with a soft smile. I'll be back before morning. She never came back. Riley had waited at the window until she fell asleep, and when she woke up, the chair by her bed was empty. Her grandmother had always been vague. Your mother had things she had to do, she'd say. Sometimes people leave because they think they're protecting you. And over time, people stopped asking. Riley stopped asking too. The silence filled in the cracks, and soon it just became part of who she was. A girl whose mother had disappeared without a trace. Until now. Until Keanu Reeves came into her diner with a photo that shattered every truth she thought she knew. At 2:00 IEM, Riley got up and flipped on her desk lamp. She opened her laptop and pulled the photo up on the screen again. She had taken a quick snapshot of it at work, just before handing it back to him. The image was blurry, but it was enough. She began searching again, this time using different keywords. Celeste Ward Keanu Reeves, Bluebird Cafe Keanu Reeves, Celeste Ward disappearance. Page after page came up with nothing useful. Obituaries for other Celeste Wards, news about Keanu's charity work, a handful of conspiracy forums linking random names to old movie roles. Nothing about her mother. Frustrated, she tried searching using facial recognition websites. She uploaded her mother's image and waited. After a long pause, a few weak matches came back. Actresses, public figures, none of them her mom. She slammed the laptop shut and ran her hands through her hair. She knew what she saw, and tomorrow she'd figure out how to prove it. The attic was dusty and dim, filled with the scent of old wood, mothballs, and fading memories. Riley climbed the creaking ladder slowly, flashlight in hand, heart pounding for reasons she couldn't explain. It had been years since she'd been up there. Years since she'd opened the battered cedar box marked Celeste Things. She remembered the box like it had its own heartbeat. Every time she passed it in the attic as a child, she felt it watching her. Her grandmother always said it was off limits, too painful to revisit. But today was different. She knelt beside the box and wiped her hand across the lid, leaving a streak in the dust. Inside were layers of belongings, sealed away like sacred relics. A small stack of children's books, a ceramic coffee mug with Brooklyn Library painted in fading teal, a scarf that still carried the faint scent of lavender. And finally, nestled at the bottom, wrapped in an old knit cardigan, was the journal. It was just as she remembered. Worn leather cover, brass latch, no key. Riley gently ran her fingers along the edge. Her mother had kept it hidden even when she was alive, always careful to tuck it away at night, slipping it under her bed like a secret too big to tell. Riley took a deep breath and picked the lock using a bobby pin, just as her teenage self had tried and failed to do years ago. This time, the latch gave way with a soft click. She opened the cover slowly. The first few pages were written in soft cursive, filled with reflections about motherhood, poetry snippets, and quiet musings about life. Then came a page with the heading, LL 1997. Riley paused. Her mother had lived in Los Angeles? That detail had never been shared with her. She turned the page and saw a paragraph written in more hurried handwriting. Arrived in LA for the nonprofit. They're doing real work, helping youth, funding scholarships. I feel like I matter here. One of the volunteers, KR, is unusually kind. Kind in the way you don't expect anymore. Quiet eyes, wounded, like he's hiding from the noise but not from the people who need him. Riley blinked. Kate? She flipped the page. There was a simple pencil sketch, rough but unmistakably detailed. A man in his late 20s, with longish hair tucked behind his ears, a soft jawline, eyes shaded with care. Beneath the sketch were 2 words, written in delicate ink. Keanu, friend. Her hands trembled slightly as she ran her finger along the drawing. Her mother had known him. Not just passed him on the street, not just served him coffee. She'd drawn his face from memory and called him friend. This wasn't random. That picture in his wallet wasn't a mistake. It was something else entirely. Riley carefully placed the journal on her lap and looked up into the rafters above, where sunlight streamed through a crack in the wood. Her heart was beating fast now, not from fear, but certainty. Keanu Reeves had known her mother, and he hadn't told her the truth. Riley sat on the attic floor, the journal cradled in her lap like a living thing. The entry about Keanu swirled in her head, but it wasn't just the name or the sketch that haunted her. It was the tenderness behind the words. Her mother had trusted him. That wasn't something she'd written lightly. Celeste had always been cautious about who she let in, even in her letters to Riley as a child. The journal continued with more entries about her time in Los Angeles. Celeste had been assigned to a youth initiative working with underserved kids, mentorship programs, art therapy, community kitchens. She'd arrived full of purpose, leaving behind her librarian life in Brooklyn temporarily to make a difference on the West Coast. And Keanu, or KR as she'd abbreviated, had appeared halfway through that chapter of her life. Helped fix the sink in the volunteer housing without being asked, then disappeared before anyone could thank him. That was one line. Another read, KR brought books to the center today. Classics, poetry, and graphic novels. The kids loved them. I watched him sit with Marcus, the shy one, for an hour and just listen. No cameras, no press, just presence. Riley felt her chest tighten. These weren't random acts. Her mother hadn't just crossed paths with Keanu. He'd been someone important in that space, someone real. She flipped a few more pages. Her mother's tone shifted, less about the nonprofit, more about confusion. Something about a change in the leadership, funding cuts, someone pulling out of the project? But KR kept showing up, even after the others left. Her mother described his quiet persistence as both comforting and tragic. And then, suddenly, the LA entries ended. No closure, no goodbye, just a leap to another topic. Back in Brooklyn, library events, story hour with children. It was as if Celeste had closed that chapter of her life entirely, without explanation. But Riley couldn't shake the feeling that something had happened, something that pulled her mother away from LA, away from KR, and eventually, from everything. She stood, clutching the journal to her chest, and descended the attic ladder slowly. Her legs felt numb, like she was coming down from something too big to process all at once. Back in the kitchen, she laid the journal on the table and snapped a photo of the sketch with her phone. Then she pulled up a search engine and typed in Keanu Reeves 1997 nonprofit volunteer, Los Angeles. The results were sparse. A few scattered references to food drives and shelter visits, a mention in an archived blog post about an unnamed celebrity helping out in East LL. No photos, no official. She scrolled further, deep into the digital dust. A 1998 news clipping popped up from a local LA paper. Just a short blurb about a youth center gala fundraiser. The list of donors included K. Reeves. Nothing more. Riley stared at the screen. It was thin, barely a thread, but it was real. Her mother's journal wasn't a dream. She had been there, and Keanu had been part of it. That night, Riley couldn't sleep. The image of her mother's handwriting replayed behind her eyes, each curl of ink filled with meaning, hinting at something more than just coincidence. Her grandmother had long maintained that Celeste had left because she couldn't handle the pressure of single motherhood. But now, Riley wasn't so sure. The quiet reverence in those journal entries, the sketch of Keanu, the way her mother had written about that time in LA. It all felt unfinished, like a door that had never been closed, only locked from the other side. She sat at her desk and reopened the photograph she'd taken of the sketch. It wasn't a perfect likeness. Her mother hadn't been an artist. But there was something unmistakable in the eyes. A kindness, a stillness, a familiarity that matched the man who had sat at booth 9 just a few mornings ago. Beneath the photo, she typed a message to Ellie. Riley. Found proof my mom knew Keanu Reeves. She wrote about him in a journal from when she was in LA. She sketched him, called him KR. I think she trusted him. I think something happened there. Ellie replied a few minutes later. Ellie, this is wild, but you still don't know what it means. Could be just a short friendship. And Riley, then why did he have her photo in his wallet after all these years? There was no response for a long while. Riley leaned back and stared at the ceiling. She didn't need confirmation. Her gut had already decided. This wasn't just some faint thread of the past. It was a lifeline, one her mother had quietly left behind, hoping someone might follow it. She opened the journal again, this time to the last LA entry. It was dated 2 days before her mother came back to Brooklyn. It read, "KR said something today that unsettled me. Some people leave not because they want to, but because they have to. I didn't ask what he meant. I was too afraid of the answer." Riley whispered the words to herself, over and over. Leave because they have to. The phrase echoed through her chest like a drumbeat. What had her mother been protecting her from? She turned the page, and tucked inside the crease, almost missed, was a small folded piece of paper. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was an address. Los Angeles, no name, just a street, a number, a zip code. She pulled up the Maps app on her phone. It was a small, unassuming building in East LA. The listing labeled it as vacant, former community center. Her heart started racing. If she wanted answers, she knew where to start. And this time, she wasn't going to just wait for someone to return. She was going to find the truth herself. Whatever her mother had left behind, it was waiting for her now. Riley sat cross-legged on her bed, laptop open, the screen glowing with the event flyer she had stared at for hours. Brooklyn Artists for Change, fundraising gala, Saturday, 7 p.m. Her thumb hovered over the submit button. Volunteer applications closed in 10 minutes. This was her only lead, her only shot. A rumor had been floating around the neighborhood for days. Keanu Reeves was attending the event quietly. No red carpet, no cameras. Just a discreet supporter of the scholarship fund tied to the arts program. Riley didn't know if it was true, but something deep inside her insisted it was. She hit submit. By Friday, she was confirmed. Riley showed up early Saturday evening, hair tied back, wearing the assigned black shirt and slacks. She was handed a name tag, R. Ward, and a clipboard with donor instructions. Her heart pounded as she scanned the guest list while pretending to review assignments. She didn't see his name. Of course she didn't. But that didn't mean he wouldn't come. The event hall buzzed with low music and quiet chatter. Art lined the walls. Paintings by local students, sculptures made from scrap metal and clay. Riley's job was simple: man the check-in booth and assist with scholarship donations. Around 7:45, she looked up from the donation box to see him. Keanu, wearing a black blazer over a soft gray t-shirt, hair slightly tousled, eyes calm. He moved like someone trying to disappear in a crowd, and nearly succeeded. No one seemed to recognize him, or maybe they were too polite to bother him. He paused at the scholarship table near the back, speaking softly with the older woman seated there. Riley watched as he pulled a checkbook from his coat, wrote something, and quietly tucked it into the envelope the woman offered. She wiped her hands against her slacks. Her knees felt weak. It was now or never. She walked slowly toward the scholarship booth, clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield. Keanu had just stepped back and was folding his wallet away when he turned. His eyes landed on her. She didn't hesitate. "Hi, excuse me. Sorry to interrupt, I think we've met at the diner a few days ago. I'm Riley Ward." For the briefest second, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, or maybe regret. Then he blinked and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "I remember." His voice was low, thoughtful. She opened her mouth to ask about the photo, but he cut in before she could speak. "Excuse me," he said gently. "I have to step out. Thank you for volunteering." He didn't wait for her reply. As he walked away, her shoulders sank. But that look in his eyes, that half second of frozen silence, it told her more than words. He knew, and he wasn't ready. Riley stood there long after he left, staring at the empty space where he'd been. The sounds of the gala faded into background noise. Her fingers curled tightly around the clipboard, but her chest felt hollow. She had prepared for so many possible outcomes: denial, confusion, even confrontation. But not this. It was not polite distance. Not that flicker of recognition followed by a retreat. The woman at the scholarship table gave her a kind smile. "Everything okay, dear?" Riley nodded too quickly. "Yes, sorry, just thought he looked familiar." "Hell does that?" the woman chuckled, not seeming to recognize him. "He dropped off a donation. Quietest one all night. No fuss, no name on the wall." Riley muttered a thank you and walked away, heart pounding. She found a corner near the catering trays and leaned against the wall. Her thoughts raced. That wasn't just a brush off. There was something behind his eyes. Grief? Guilt? Something had passed between them, silent but unmistakable. Ellie's words rang in her head. Don't go chasing shadows. But this wasn't a shadow. This was real. She had said her name. Riley Ward. And his expression had changed. The mask had cracked. And that single moment told her everything she needed. He remembered her mother. She stayed at the event until closing, helping collect brochures and pack away easels. Her mind wasn't on the artwork or the checklists. It was on him, Keanu Reeves, a man who had carried her mother's photo in his wallet. A man who had vanished as soon as he heard her name. By the time she reached her apartment that night, the sky had turned a dark slate gray. She tossed the clipboard onto the kitchen counter, kicked off her shoes, and collapsed onto the couch. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, soft and worn. Your mama had secrets, baby. Some of them were too heavy to carry. Riley looked up at the old photo pinned above the bookshelf. Her mother holding her at age 5, arms wrapped tight, a smile so familiar it ached. She traced the image with her eyes. What secret was so heavy that her mother had vanished? Why had Keanu kept her picture? She picked up her phone and searched again. Celeste Ward, Keanu Reeves, Los Angeles nonprofit, 1990 S. Still nothing. She tried public records. Nothing. Her mother had disappeared without a trace. But now, 20 years later, a stranger recognized her name. And it broke him. That wasn't nothing. She got up, walked to the window, and stared down at the city. The streets buzzed with movement, people going home, people returning to lives they understood. Riley didn't understand anything anymore. But she knew one thing. Keanu Reeves wasn't just a movie star passing through. He was part of her story. And whether he liked it or not, she wasn't done asking questions. The next morning, Riley sat at her kitchen table with 2 cups of black coffee, one untouched, the other lukewarm from her restless sips. Ellie arrived wearing leggings and a hoodie, hair in a loose braid, looking like she'd jogged over straight from the gym. One look at Riley's face, and she dropped the act. And remembered something, didn't he? Riley didn't answer right away. She pushed the untouched mug toward Ellie, then stared out the window. When I said my name, he looked at me like I'd slapped him. Ellie sat down slowly. And then? Who walked away, politely but fast, like something hit him and he didn't want me to see. Ellie leaned in, quiet. Do you think he knows what happened to your mom? I think he knows more than he's ready to say, Riley whispered, and that scares me. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the unknown thick between them. You're going to see him again, aren't you? Ellie finally said. Riley nodded. I have to. This isn't just some mystery. It's my mother, my life. And he's carrying a piece of it. Ellie hesitated, then sighed. I'll help you. Just promise me one thing. Anything. Don't lose yourself trying to chase someone else's truth. Riley looked away. What if that truth is mine, too? That night, she pulled out the journal again. Celeste's writing was so neat, so steady, filled with thoughts on books, social justice, and fleeting entries about her nonprofit work. But one passage stopped her cold. March 11. Coffee this morning with KR. Still won't let me pay. Kindness like that is rare. He listens, not just with his ears, but with his whole heart. I'm afraid to tell him I'm leaving, but maybe he already knows. The words burned on the page. KR, Keanu. He hadn't just been someone she worked with. He was someone she had cared about. Someone who'd left a mark, and now, all these years later, he still carried her face in his wallet. Riley ran her fingers along the journal's spine. It felt heavier than before, weighted with things left unsaid. There was more to this story. There had to be. And if her mother had trusted Keanu once, Maybe he was the only one left who could finish the sentence she'd been trying to write her entire life. She opened her laptop and stared at a blank email draft. Then she typed, "Mr. Reeve, I think you knew my mother, Celeste Ward. I'm not looking for attention, I'm looking for the truth. I believe you have it." Her finger hovered over the send button, and for the first time in days, she didn't feel afraid. She clicked send. Riley had just finished refilling the napkin dispensers when Mia, the morning hostess, waved her over with a puzzled look. "This came for you," she said, holding out a cream-colored envelope with Riley's name written in neat, elegant handwriting. No return address, no stamp, just her name. Her heart skipped. She took the envelope with both hands, fingers already trembling. The background noise of customers chatting and plates clinking faded. She ducked behind the counter and opened it. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. She unfolded it slowly. "I did know your mother. She was one of the kindest souls I've ever met. If you want to talk, meet me tomorrow. Sunset, Prospect Park." Bench 42. No signature, no explanation. But Riley knew who it was. The handwriting was unmistakable. It had to be Keanu Reeves. Her breath caught. She read it again. Her mother. One of the kindest souls. Those few words lit a fire in her chest. Someone out there didn't just remember Celeste. They admired her, cherished her. And Keanu was offering to talk. 1,000 emotions surged through Riley. Hope, anxiety, disbelief. She pressed the letter to her chest, then quickly tucked it into her apron pocket. Mia gave her a curious look, but Riley just shook her head, unable to explain. She finished her shift on autopilot, hands moving out of habit while her thoughts raced. She replayed every moment from the fundraiser, trying to decipher Keanu's face when she said her name. The slight change in his posture. The pause. The way he left without explanation. Now it made sense. He knew who she was. He just wasn't ready then. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the letter resting on her nightstand like a burning question. She thought of her mother, of the soft smell of her perfume, the way she used to hum as she folded laundry, her love of old movies and jazz records. Celeste had vanished without a trace when Riley was just 6. Everyone said she walked away, but maybe they were wrong. The next day, Riley called the diner and told them she was sick. She hated lying to her boss, but there was no way she was missing this. Some truths were more important than a perfect attendance record. By late afternoon, she was walking through the winding paths of Prospect Park, her boots crunching over fallen leaves. The sky was shifting into soft gold, streaked with amber and deepening blue. She clutched the letter in her coat pocket, her fingers tracing the folds like a talisman. Bench 42. She checked each plaque on the wooden benches as she walked. 39, 40, 41. Then, at the crest of a small hill under a maple tree just beginning to bloom, she found it. Bench 42, and it was empty. Riley sat down slowly, heart pounding, scanning the winding path in both directions. Each time a stranger passed, her breath hitched, wondering if it might be him. She checked the time. 20 minutes to sunset. She sat still, hands folded tightly in her lap, trying not to look as nervous as she felt. The park had a quiet rhythm. Joggers moving past with earbuds in, a father pushing a stroller, a dog tugging at its leash. And still, bench 42 remained empty. The sun dipped lower behind the trees, casting long shadows across the grass. Riley glanced down at her phone, tempted to text Ellie, but she stopped herself. This moment felt too big to share yet. If she told someone, it might collapse under the weight of other voices. The wind picked up, tugging loose strands of her hair across her face. She shivered, more from anticipation than cold. Her fingers fidgeted in her coat pocket, clutching the envelope again. Each minute stretched longer than the last. Doubts crept in. What if he changed his mind? What if the letter wasn't really from him? What if this was all just her imagination, spinning out of control? She closed her eyes and tried to breathe. But just then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate. She turned. Keanu Reeves stood at the edge of the clearing, dressed simply in dark jeans, a wool coat, and a gray scarf. His hair was windswept, his expression unreadable. He saw her, paused for a beat, then walked over, every step steady and purposeful. Riley stood quickly, nerves tightening every muscle in her body. He stopped a few feet away. "May I sit?" She nodded, too stunned to speak. He sat beside her, leaving a respectful space between them. For a long moment, neither said anything, just the rustle of trees and the distant echo of children laughing. Finally, he spoke, voice soft. "Thank you for coming." Riley's voice caught in her throat, but she managed a quiet, "Thank you for the letter." He looked ahead, nodded her, hands clasped loosely between his knees. "I haven't said her name out loud in a long time," he said. Celeste. She was special. Riley turned slightly, studying his profile. "You really knew her?" Keanu nodded once. "A long time ago. In another life, it feels like." Her hands trembled slightly. "Everyone told me she just left, that she chose to disappear." "She didn't choose to vanish," he said, still not meeting her eyes. "There were circumstances, things she couldn't control." A long silence followed. Riley's thoughts swirled. She wanted to ask everything at once. Why did she leave? Where did she go? Why was her photo in his wallet? But what came out instead was, did she talk about me? This time Keanu turned. His gaze met hers, and the sadness in his eyes made her breath catch. "All the time?" Keanu leaned back slightly on the bench, his voice softer now, more reflective. "She used to describe the way you'd wrinkle your nose when you were curious, said you asked questions no one else thought to ask. She said you had her eyes, but your father's sense of direction." Riley's throat tightened. "I don't even remember what she sounded like." He nodded slowly. "That's the cruel part of time. It takes away the details." She looked down at her hands, twisting the edge of her sleeve. "I always thought she left because she didn't want me. Because something about me made her go." "No," Keanu said gently. "Never that." Riley looked up, blinking fast. "Then why? Why did she go? Why didn't she come back?" He hesitated, choosing his words with care. Celeste got involved with something she didn't expect, something she couldn't walk away from without consequences. She wasn't running from you, she was trying to protect you. From what? His silence was answer enough, for now. She saw it in his eyes. Pain, regret, and something else. Loyalty, maybe, to a promise he hadn't yet broken. "He kept a journal," Riley said, almost as if testing him. "I found it. There's a sketch of you. She called you K." Keanu offered a faint smile. "She always liked her little codes." "He wrote about a non-profit," Riley continued. "Los Angeles, early 90s. She said there were people watching, following, and then the entries stopped." He drew in a slow breath and exhaled like the weight of that memory hadn't left him either. "She worked with a group trying to protect exploited kids. A dangerous group was exposed. The fallout was bigger than we thought. She testified in secret, then disappeared. Voluntarily? With help. Was it your help?" "I tried to talk her out of it," he said. "Tried everything, but Celeste was stubborn, brave. She didn't want her daughter growing up in fear." Riley sat still, letting the silence settle around them. "And the photo?" she finally asked. "Why carry it after all these years?" Keanu turned away from her and looked out toward the setting sun. "Because I owed her that much," he said quietly. "Because I promised I'd watch from a distance. And I did. You grew up stronger than even she imagined." Riley's voice cracked. "She died, didn't..." He looked down, voice barely above a whisper. I don't know. Those words hit harder than any confirmation. The not knowing. The limbo. But if there's even a chance she's alive. He looked at her again, eyes steady now. Would you want to know everything? Even if it changes what you thought you knew about her? Yes, Riley said. Whatever it is. I want the truth. Keanu nodded, then stood slowly. Tomorrow, same time, same place. Come alone. Then he walked away, leaving Riley staring at the empty bench beside her and the impossible question echoing in her heart. What didn't she know about the woman she had spent a lifetime missing? The sun dipped low over Prospect Park, casting long amber shadows across the walking paths and the glistening pond nearby. Riley sat alone on bench 42, her heart pounding louder than the jogger's footsteps passing by. She hadn't told Ellie, she hadn't told her grandmother, she hadn't told a soul. The letter still sat folded in her jacket pocket, its edges worn from her fingers, retracing every word. She had waited for this moment, swinging between hope and fear, telling herself it might be a joke. But it hadn't felt like one. The handwriting was too steady, the tone too sincere. She checked her watch. 5 minutes past sunset. The sky had already begun its descent into violet. A breeze stirred the leaves beside her. Maybe he wasn't coming. Then the sound of footsteps approached from the side path. Steady, not rushed. Riley turned her head, and there he was. Keanu Reeves, dressed in a soft gray coat, his hair a little tousled, his presence quiet but unmistakable. No entourage, no sunglasses, just him. Bench 42, he said gently, offering a slight smile. Riley nodded, suddenly unsure how to speak, her fingers clenched around the letter in her pocket. You came? He sat beside her, leaving a respectful space between them. I said I would. For a moment they just sat there, watching the sunlight flicker out on the water's surface. Riley glanced sideways. Why now? She asked. Why say something after all these years? He breathed in deeply, as if the answer took effort to carry. Because I saw your eyes, he said. They reminded me of someone I never forgot. My mother. He nodded slowly. Celeste. I knew her when I was barely starting out, long before the world knew my name. She was running a youth reading program out in Los Angeles. I was just another kid who wanted to help but didn't know how. Riley leaned in slightly, trying to imagine it. She never told me about you. She barely told me anything. She wouldn't have, Keanu said quietly. She was protective. But she was brilliant, kind. She had a way of making every kid in that room feel like they mattered. I only worked there a few months, but something about her stuck with me. Riley swallowed hard. Then why did she leave? Why did she leave me? Keanu turned toward her, the pain in her voice piercing through the dusk. I don't know, he admitted. That's the part I never understood. Riley blinked quickly, looking away. People told me she abandoned us, that she just disappeared. I can't imagine her doing that, Keanu said softly, but I can't pretend I know the full story. She looked down at her hands. But you kept her photo. He nodded again. Because she reminded me who I wanted to be. And I guess I didn't want to lose that. Riley's voice trembled. Then help me find out what happened to her. Keanu didn't hesitate. I will. The silence that followed his promise wasn't empty. It was sacred. Riley felt something shift in the air, like a lock inside her chest quietly releasing. She hadn't expected him to say yes so quickly. She hadn't expected him to believe her without proof. But there he was, sitting calmly beside her, treating the name Celeste not like a ghost, but like a woman who mattered. How do we start? She asked, trying to slow her breathing. Keanu leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Tell me everything you remember. Not just about her, but about what happened after she left. Riley nodded, focusing on the grass in front of her. I was 6. She dropped me off at my grandmother's house one Saturday morning, said she'd be back by dinner. I remember her hugging me longer than usual. Her hands were shaking. She looked scared, but she tried to hide it. Keanu's jaw clenched slightly. Night she didn't come home. The police said there was no sign of foul play. Her car was found parked near the edge of town. No damage, no notes, just gone. Did she have any enemies? Strange behavior before that? Not that I knew. But I was a kid, Riley said, her voice thickening. And after a few weeks, the adults stopped talking about her like she was missing. They started talking like she was gone on purpose. But you never believed that. I couldn't, Riley whispered. She was my mom. She used to sing to me every night. She made up stories about stars that had secret names only we knew. She would never just vanish. Keanu nodded slowly, absorbing her words. You said at the fundraiser that your name was Riley Ward? Yeah. His eyes met hers. That's what caught me off guard. That's why I left. Because of my name? He nodded. Celeste's last name was Ward when I knew her. But she never mentioned having a child. I didn't know until I heard your name. And when I saw your face, it was like seeing her again. Riley's throat tightened. Do you think she changed her name? Or was hiding something? I don't know, Keanu said honestly. But I do know this. Celeste was strong, brave. She wouldn't have run unless she had a reason. Riley looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. Then let's find it. He pulled a small notepad from his coat pocket. I've kept some contacts from back then, old friends from LA, a few who worked at the same nonprofit. You think someone might know where she went? I think someone might know why she disappeared. Riley clutched the edge of the bench. This feels unreal. He looked at her gently. Sometimes the past comes back, because it's time to finish the story. Riley stared at the fading light beyond the trees, her heart beating like it hadn't in years. Then, I'm ready. He gave her a slow nod. We'll start tomorrow. They walked slowly through the park, dusk settling around them like a quiet curtain. Keanu didn't say much, and Riley was grateful. Her mind buzzed with questions she wasn't ready to ask yet. Just being near someone who had known her mother, who still remembered her, felt like touching a forgotten thread that might lead somewhere real. Where did you meet her? Riley asked after a long pause. South LA. It was the late 80s. I was barely 20, just getting by and still figuring out who I was. I'd volunteered for this tiny reading program because a friend dragged me into it. Thought it would be a one-time thing. But it wasn't, Riley guessed. He smiled faintly. Not after I met Celeste. She ran the whole thing on a shoestring budget and sheer will. She taught kids to read by using old stories from her childhood, myths, fairy tales, science fiction. But it wasn't just about literacy. She believed stories could teach kids they mattered, that they could reimagine their futures. Riley blinked back the sting in her eyes. That sounds like her. She challenged me too, called me out when I didn't take things seriously, pushed me to read to the kids with heart, not just words. What happened between you? Keanu looked down, kicking at a fallen leaf. I don't think we ever defined it. We were close. Maybe we were just two people trying to find light in a dark city. She had this way of making you feel like you weren't broken, even when you were. Did you love her? Riley's voice came out softer than she expected. He looked up surprised. Then he nodded. In my own quiet way, yes. I think a part of me always did. But she never let anyone in completely. There was a sadness she carried like a secret. Riley's chest ached, and then she just left. Someday, she said she had to return to New York. Family matters, she told me. I never saw her again. I wrote, called, but everything bounced back. Then I got busy with auditions, movie sets, the whirlwind. But she kept her photo. He nodded. She changed my life. I wouldn't be who I am without her. They stopped near the edge of a small pond. Streetlights shimmered on the water. Riley turned to him. There's more I didn't say before. I found her journal. She mentioned someone named KR, and there was a drawing. A young man with a kind smile. Keanu's breath caught. I think she remembered you too. They stood in silence for a moment longer. Then Keanu's voice dropped to a near whisper. Let's find out what happened, Riley. Together. She nodded, her voice shaking. Let's find the truth. And with that quiet pact sealed under the settling night, they turned toward the park exit. Step by step, Riley and Keanu walked into a future neither of them had expected. One built on stories long buried, and a bond neither fully understood yet. The next morning, Riley met Keanu outside the faded brick building that once housed the little nonprofit where her mother had worked. The weathered sign above the doorway now read East Grove Community Center. It had been decades, and yet something about the place felt untouched, like time had been kind here. Or maybe just respectful. Keanu held the door for her as they stepped inside. The scent of floor polish and old paper filled the air. On the walls were colorful flyers for after-school programs, tutoring sessions, and art workshops. Children's laughter echoed faintly down the hall. At the front desk sat a small, wiry woman with silver hair tied back in a neat bun. She looked up from her crossword puzzle as they approached, adjusting her glasses. "Can I help you?" she asked with polite curiosity. "Yes," Riley said carefully. "We're looking for some information about someone who used to work here a long time ago, Celeste Ward." The woman blinked. Then, slowly, her eyes widened. "Celeste Ward?" she repeated, almost reverently. "I haven't heard that name in years. You knew her?" "She was my mother," Riley said softly. The woman placed a hand over her heart. "You look like her. Same eyes, same gentle presence." Keanu stepped forward. "She was an incredible woman," he added. The woman studied him for a moment, and recognition flickered behind her eyes. "You used to come in here. I remember you, always carrying dog-eared books, reading to the kids in the corner room." Keanu smiled faintly. "That was me." "She always spoke so highly of you," the woman said, her voice a little shaken. "You were one of her favorites. Said you had a quiet fire about you." Riley leaned forward. "Do you know what happened to her?" The woman's face darkened slightly. "She left. Just like that. No goodbye, no warning. It broke a lot of hearts around here, especially the children. One day she was here, the next, gone. Some folks thought she'd gotten another job, but I knew it was more than that." "What do you mean?" Riley asked. The woman hesitated, then gestured toward a hallway. "Come with me." They followed her through a narrow corridor lined with photos of smiling children and old plaques. At the end, she opened a door to a storage room filled with stacked chairs and faded boxes. "I was cleaning this room out a few years back," she explained, reaching for a dusty file cabinet in the corner. "Found something with Celeste's name on it. I didn't have the heart to throw it away. Figured maybe someone would come looking for her one day." She pulled open the bottom drawer and retrieved a thin manila folder. It was sealed with a brittle rubber band. She handed it to Riley. "She left this with a note. I didn't read it. Figured it wasn't meant for me." Riley took the folder with trembling hands. Written across the front in neat, familiar handwriting were 5 words. Riley sat down on a nearby bench just outside the storage room, her fingers motionless on the folder. Keanu stood quietly beside her, hands in his coat pockets, waiting. The woman who'd given it to them had returned to her crossword, respectfully giving them space. The cardboard felt heavy, not in weight, but in memory. She looked at Keanu, who gave her a small, reassuring nod. Slowly, Riley peeled off the dry rubber band. Inside were several loose pages of old stationery, the edges yellowed with time. On top was a folded note. Riley opened it and read the handwriting, flowing, careful, unmistakably her mother's. "Riley, if you're reading this, it means you've found your way to a place I hoped you'd never need. I'm sorry for what happened. I'm sorry I had to leave, but I did it to protect you. The world doesn't always allow peace, especially when you've escaped someone who wants to pull you back. You were too young to understand then, and I couldn't bear to see fear in your eyes. But you were always my light. Inside this folder is a key. You'll know what it's for when the time is right. Love always." Oh. Riley pressed the letter to her chest, trying to hold herself together as the emotions surged. She'd spent so many years wondering if her mother had simply walked away without a thought. This note shattered that lie. "She didn't leave because of me," Riley whispered. "She left because of him." Keanu leaned slightly closer. "Your father?" Riley nodded, wiping her cheek. "I barely remember him. He was loud, always angry. I remember my mom packing a bag one night, telling me we were going to Grandma's for a visit. I never saw her again after that." She looked down into the folder. Beneath the note was a small antique key taped to a card. The brass had darkened with age, and there was a small star etched near the handle. No label, no address. She turned the key over in her hand. What could it possibly open? Keanu knelt beside her, gently resting his hand on her arm. Maybe it opens something more than a door. Maybe it unlocks the part of her story that no one else was ever allowed to know. Riley looked into his eyes, steady and calm, and felt a flicker of strength return to her. The pain, the longing, the silence of all those lost years. It hadn't been her imagination. It hadn't been abandonment. It had been survival. She took a long, deep breath and slid the key back into the folder. She glanced once more at her mother's words, still shaking from the weight of their meaning. "She was trying to leave clues," Riley said. "She wanted me to find the truth, but only when I was ready." "And now?" Keanu asked softly. Riley stood. "Now I want to know everything." The sun dipped lower as they stepped out of the center, the sky dusted with a quiet gold. Riley held the folder tightly to her chest like it contained something sacred. The key now sat in her coat pocket, resting against her side like a heartbeat. They walked side by side, neither of them speaking for a while. The street noise of Brooklyn hummed around them, but it felt far away, muffled beneath the weight of memory. Keanu finally broke the silence. "You said your grandmother raised you?" Riley nodded. "She did her best. She was kind but quiet. Anytime I asked about my mom, she'd just say, 'Celeste had to leave,' and she'd never answer questions about my dad. Did she ever talk about him at all?" Riley thought back. "Not really. Just once, after I came home crying from school. A teacher asked if I was abandoned. I was 8. I asked my grandmother if it was true. She looked at me and said, 'Celeste ran from something. That's not the same as running from you.' I didn't understand it then." Keanu stopped walking and faced her gently. "You do now." Riley gave a soft nod. "I do." They turned a corner and came to a row of old brownstones. Everything looked so ordinary, so unchanged. People walking dogs, kids playing on steps. But Riley's world had shifted. As they approached a small coffee shop, she paused. "Let's sit for a minute." They went inside, found a quiet table near the back, and ordered tea. Riley placed the folder on the table and opened it again. Beneath the letter and the key was a photograph, one she hadn't noticed earlier. It was black and white, slightly curled at the edges. In the photo, her mother stood in front of a book display, smiling, mid-laugh, and next to her, unmistakably younger, with long hair and that familiar warmth in his eyes, was Keanu. Riley turned it toward him. "Is this from the reading program?" He looked at the photo for a long time. "Yeah, that was the first summer we worked together. She was magnetic, had this way of making kids feel like they mattered. There was something else in his expression, nostalgia, sorrow, and something gentler too. "I didn't know she had a daughter," he added quietly. "If I had, I would have found you sooner." Riley gave a bittersweet smile. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe she knew that. She looked back down at the key. It didn't shine or gleam. It was old, plain, but it meant everything. "What now?" Keanu asked. Riley held up the key and studied it. "Now we figure out what this unlocks. If she left it behind for me, it means there's more to her story." Keanu finished his tea. "Then let's follow the next breadcrumb." As they stepped back out into the street, the last of the light slipping below the rooftops, Riley felt the ache of the unknown, but also, for the first time in years, the momentum of hope. The next morning, the key lay on the table between them, small, brushed metal and numbered in delicate script, B47. Riley hadn't slept much. Her mind was spinning with questions, memories, and emotions she couldn't even begin to untangle. Across from her, Keanu sat quietly, sipping a second cup of black coffee. He hadn't pushed her. He didn't ask what she planned to do. He just waited, calmly, giving her the space to breathe. But now, the silence broke. "I think I'm ready," Riley said. Keanu met her eyes and nodded once. No encouragement, no urging, just quiet support. It was all she needed. By midday, they stood together outside a small branch of Brooklyn Trust Bank, the kind of place most people passed without noticing. Riley clutched the key tightly in her coat pocket, her knuckles pale. She glanced at Keanu. "I don't even know what I'm hoping to find." He gave a small smile. Sometimes the truth is enough. Inside, the air was sterile and cold, humming with fluorescent lights. The receptionist glanced at the key, then at Riley's ID, and typed something into the system. "We'll need your signature and fingerprint here," the woman said gently. "It's a legacy box, inactive for over 20 years, but it's yours." She led them down a quiet hallway lined with reinforced doors. A staff member with a keycard swiped them into the private vault. Rows of numbered boxes gleamed along the walls like safety-packed secrets. Box B47 sat at eye level. Riley inserted the key. It clicked. The box slid out smoothly, lighter than she expected. They were led into a small viewing room and left alone. Keanu stayed back as Riley placed the box on the table and slowly opened it. Inside was a small bundle wrapped in blue velvet. Her breath caught. Hands trembling, she peeled back the fabric. A neat stack of letters, bound with a faded ribbon, sat underneath. Dozens of envelopes, each one addressed in her mother's handwriting. To Riley Ward. Riley's eyes welled immediately. Her fingers hovered, then picked up the top envelope. On the back, a date. July 6th, 2003. The year her mother disappeared. She opened it with care. "Dearest Riley, if you're reading this, then somehow you've found me again, or at least the truth I left behind. I wanted to send this letter so many times. I wrote to you every week for months, but I didn't know where to send them. I didn't know if I'd ever be allowed. And more than that, I was afraid. Afraid that finding me might hurt you more than losing me." The handwriting was elegant, looping, and instantly familiar. Riley's heart ached with every word. She looked up, barely able to speak. "He wrote to me." Keanu nodded, his voice low. "Then let's read them." Riley took a deep breath and unfolded the second letter. Riley opened the next letter with shaking fingers. Her eyes scanned the page, barely keeping up with her racing heart. July 13, 2003. "My sweet girl, I dream about your voice, about the way you used to say, 'Read it again, Mama,' whenever I'd finish a story. I close my eyes and pretend I'm still sitting on the rug in the library, you curled up beside me. I never meant to disappear. I never meant to let you believe I left because I didn't love you. I left because I did." Riley paused, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. She could feel her younger self in that memory, 5 years old, clutching a worn copy of Harold and the Purple Crayon, her mother's voice soft and sure, even as the world outside had begun to tremble. Keanu stepped forward but didn't speak. He sat beside her, his presence grounding. She read on, "Your father wasn't always dangerous. When we met, he was brilliant, charming, kind. But something shifted. After you were born, the pressure cracked him open in all the wrong places. It started with silence, then shouting, then bruises I tried to hide. I should have left sooner. I know that now." Riley's chest tightened. The memories were vague, more feeling than form. A slammed door, a broken mug, the echo of someone crying when she couldn't find the sound. Celeste's letter continued. "I tried everything, baby. I tried the courts, I tried counselors, but your father's family had influence, money. They said I was unstable, said I was making things up. I wasn't, I swear to you. I would have taken you with me if I thought it was safe, but they would have found us, and if they found us, I was afraid they'd take you for good. So I left you with Grandma. I left a piece of myself with you, hoping one day, this day, you'd understand." Riley let the letter fall to the table, her breath catching in her throat. She looked at Keanu, her voice small. "She didn't leave me because she wanted to. She left to protect me." Keanu reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "You were never forgotten." Riley wiped her eyes and reached for the next letter. This one was dated weeks later, August 1, 2003. "Dear Riley, I heard through someone at the shelter that your first day of school is coming up. I hope you're still obsessed with yellow crayons. I hope you still try to climb everything like the monkey you were. I wonder what you're dreaming about these days. I hope it's stars and books and magic. I'm trying to build something better for us. Someday, I'll be strong enough to come back." Riley read it twice, then pressed the paper to her chest. Her mother hadn't stopped writing. She had only stopped being heard. Riley leaned forward and opened the last envelope in the stack. This one was thicker, its paper yellowed with age and folded several times over. A small, dried flower slipped out as she unfolded it. Lavender, preserved carefully between the pages. November 20, 2003. "My brave girl. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't get back to you in time. I don't know what life gave you, or what you've come to believe about me. But know this, with everything in your heart, I never stopped being your mother. I never stopped loving you, not for 1 second." Riley's eyes burned as the words sank in. She had spent years building emotional walls, telling herself not to miss someone who had chosen to walk away. But those walls were now crumbling, brick by aching brick. The letter continued. "I tried. I tried every door I could find, but every path was locked. When I left, it was with the hope that time would heal, that maybe someday the world would be kind again, that you would grow up safe, that you would become someone strong enough to find the truth if I couldn't deliver it myself." A chill passed through Riley. These words weren't just apologies. They were her mother's roadmap, her blessing. Inside the envelope was a small slip of paper taped to the bottom fold. Riley peeled it away gently. It was a deposit receipt from a shelter in Los Angeles, dated 6 months after her mother disappeared. Beneath it, scribbled in blue ink, were 4 words. "He found me again." Riley's heart stopped. She looked up at Keanu. Hell came after her. Keanu frowned, then leaned forward to study the note. She was on the run. Riley nodded, her mind reeling. "This changes everything," she whispered. Keanu looked at her steadily, and it's not the end of what she left behind. Riley returned her gaze to the box. Beneath the final letter, carefully wrapped in wax paper, was a small pendant. a circle with a tree carved into it. Her fingers trembled as she held it up. "My mom wore this every day," she said, voice cracking. "She told me it meant we were rooted, even if we got blown away." She clutched it in her palm like a lifeline. "We have to find out what happened to her after that date," she said. "She was still alive, still trying." Keanu gave a slow nod. "Then that's exactly what we'll do." As Riley closed the safe deposit box and handed the key back to the bank attendant, her hands no longer shook. She walked out into the sunlight beside Keanu, letters clutched tightly against her chest. Her mother hadn't vanished into silence. She'd left a voice waiting in the dark, one Riley was finally ready to hear. The safe deposit box sat open before them, its contents carefully removed and stacked neatly on the small table in the bank's private viewing room. Riley held the last unopened envelope in her lap, her fingers brushing the edges like it was something fragile and holy. Keanu sat beside her, silent, waiting. Outside, the muted sounds of the city carried on, but here, in this small room, time seemed to still. Riley took a deep breath and broke the seal. Inside was a folded sheet of lined paper, yellowed at the edges. Unlike the others, this one wasn't dated. The handwriting was her mother's, unmistakable and flowing. At the top of the page were only 8 words. "If anything happens to me, promise me she'll know the truth." Riley's eyes blurred before she could read the next line. Her fingers trembled as she pressed the paper flat. She forced herself to keep going. "I've been followed. I know it. I hear footsteps when I walk home. Sometimes I see the same car parked near the library. He's found me again. I don't know how, but I know the way he moves. The way he waits in shadows. I feel it. The air tightens when he's close." Keanu leaned closer. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix the moment. He just stayed still and present, the way someone does when they know anything else might make it worse. "I wanted to fight him in court, but I was alone. My family said it wasn't worth it. They said I was overreacting, said I was stirring up the past. But I saw the look in his eyes the day I told him I wanted full custody. That wasn't a father's grief. It was fury, the kind that doesn't fade." Riley lowered the letter to her lap. Her hands covered her mouth, but the sound escaped anyway. A sob, raw and low, like something pulled from deep inside. She had always believed her mother had left, walked away, left her to grow up in someone else's arms, in someone else's silence. But it wasn't abandonment. It was protection. "I should have known," she whispered, voice cracking. "I should have questioned the story. I lived with it for years. I built my whole personality around being the girl who was..." Keanu turned toward her, his expression quiet but full of weight. "You were loved," he said gently. "That doesn't disappear just because you were told otherwise." Riley shook her head. "I spent most of my life afraid I'd become her. Not the librarian, not the woman who helped people, the version they painted unstable, unreliable, weak. I carried that fear like a warning." "You carried it like armor," Keanu replied. "But armor can get heavy." She looked up at him, eyes wet. "I don't know who I am without the story I grew up with. I don't know how to be someone who was actually wanted." He gave her a small, sad smile. "Then, maybe it's time to write a new story." Riley didn't speak. She just reached back for the letter and read the final lines again, this time out loud. "If anything happens to me, promise me she'll know the truth. Promise she'll know I loved her, that I left to keep her safe, and that I never stopped believing she'd one day understand." The room fell silent again, but something in the air shifted. The weight hadn't gone, but it had changed. Riley sat motionless, the letter still open in her hands. The final lines echoed in her mind, louder than any noise outside. She had come looking for facts, for a trail of evidence to explain why her mother vanished. But what she found was something deeper. A confession. a sacrifice. Her throat tightened. She wrote this not knowing if I'd ever see it. She left it anyway, Keanu said, voice low and steady. That kind of hope. That doesn't come from fear. That's love. Riley pressed her palm to the center of her chest, as if trying to steady the storm inside. It hurts more, somehow. Knowing she didn't leave because she didn't want me, but because she did. That's how grief works sometimes, Keanu said. It surprises you. Sometimes the truth heals, and sometimes it cracks you open all over again. Feel like I've been lied to by everyone, Riley murmured. My grandmother, my dad, everyone who told me not to ask questions. I wasted so much time trying to earn love that was already mine. Keanu leaned back slightly, letting the silence hold for a moment. You didn't waste it. You survived it. Her eyes filled again. I built this wall around me. I didn't let people get close. I thought, if I didn't mean much to the woman who gave birth to me, why should I mean something to anyone else? Keanu turned toward her, hands resting on the edge of the table. That's not who you are. That's who the wound tried to convince you to be. She looked down at the letter again, the paper trembling in her grip. And now, I feel like I'm mourning someone I haven't even lost yet. Keanu nodded slowly. Because even if she's still alive somewhere, the years are gone. The birthdays, the graduations, the small stuff. We would have just wanted her at my choir recital, Riley whispered. I still remember the empty seat in the front row. He reached across the table and gently placed a hand over hers. You still became someone worth loving. That says a lot about her, and about you. Riley's lips trembled as she exhaled. How do you forgive a lie that long? You don't all at once, Keanu answered. You forgive it in pieces. You start with yourself. She swallowed hard. I don't know where to begin. Keanu's voice softened. Begin by believing this. You were never the problem. You were never too much. You were never someone to be discarded. She blinked away tears, and for the first time, her breathing began to steady. The storm wasn't over, but she had an anchor now. I can't change what happened, she said. No, Keanu replied, but you can choose what you do next. She looked at him. And what would you do if you were me? I'd follow the story until the end, he said simply. Whatever that means, whatever it uncovers. I'd give her the dignity of being known and give myself the right to feel everything. A long pause followed. Riley folded the letter carefully and placed it back in its envelope. She tucked it beside the others, as if giving them a home they were always meant to have. Then she stood. I want to know everything, she said quietly, even if it breaks me. Keanu rose with her. Then I'll help you find it, whatever it is. Together they left the bank. The sun was low now, casting golden light across the pavement. Riley held the file of letters close to her chest, not like a burden, but like a torch. The truth didn't undo the past, but it had the power to shape the future. And for the first time, Riley believed that future might actually belong to her. The library was quiet, the kind of quiet that wrapped around you like an old memory. Riley walked beside Keanu through the children's wing of the Brooklyn Public Library, her eyes scanning the soft carpets, the low wooden shelves, the beanbag chairs tucked into cozy reading nooks. It felt like a dream, one of those strange, slow-moving moments where the present folded gently into the past. Keanu stopped near a colorful mural of cartoon animals, then pointed toward a small reading room just past it. It's through there, he said softly. Riley followed him, heart fluttering with something between dread and awe. The room itself was warm, lit with natural light from tall arched windows. A circle of child-sized chairs surrounded a gently worn rug. Storybooks lined the shelves, their spines marked with use. In the corner, beside a short podium and a hanging mobile of paper stars, was a simple bronze plaque mounted on the wall. Riley stepped closer. The words were etched in neat, serif lettering. The Celeste W. Reading Room, in memory of a quiet soul who lit the path for others. Anonymous donor. She felt her breath catch. Her mother's name there on the wall, not in a forgotten box or faded photograph, but alive in a room filled with laughter and learning. She looked at Keanu. His expression was solemn. "You did this," she said. He nodded slowly. "A long time ago, after I read in a paper that Celeste had passed. It wasn't much, just something I could do." Riley blinked, emotions rising too fast to name. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "I didn't know how," he said. "I wasn't sure if it would matter. Back then, I didn't even know she had a daughter. But she meant something to me, so I found a place that matched her spirit and left it in her name." Riley reached out and touched the plaque with her fingertips. Cold bronze, but somehow warm too. Her mother, the woman who read stories aloud in funny voices, who kept a journal no one was allowed to read, who disappeared when Riley was 6 and left behind silence and shadows. She had left ripples. She had mattered, not just to Riley, but to people like Keanu. Enough to inspire this room, this legacy. "I always wondered if she just vanished," Riley whispered. "Like she didn't leave a mark. But this, she did." "She changed people," Keanu said. "Me included. I was 19, reckless, lost. Volunteering at a reading program was supposed to be a short-term thing, but she saw through the noise, treated me like I had something real to offer, gave me patience, belief. No one ever did that before her." Riley turned away, blinking back tears. Her mother hadn't disappeared. She had just been hidden in other people's memories, in quiet gestures like this. Keanu stepped beside her. "If you want, I can help with something else. It might give you more clarity about what happened." Riley looked up. "What do you mean?" "There are legal ways to request sealed court documents, old custody hearings, domestic filings, any records involving your father's behavior back then. I know a lawyer who could walk you through the process." Quietly, Riley's stomach tightened. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." "You don't have to do it alone." She stared back at the plaque, her mother's name catching the light. For years, she'd chased a ghost. But standing here now, surrounded by books and Keanu's unwavering presence, the truth felt a little more solid. "I want to know everything," she whispered. "Then let's do it together," Keanu said. The following day, Riley sat across from Keanu in the office of a small, discreet law firm in downtown Brooklyn. The walls were lined with shelves of legal binders, and the air smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. Keanu had arranged everything: an appointment with Ms. Laurel Crane, a private attorney known for her sensitivity and discretion. Laurel, a woman in her 50s with gentle eyes and a voice like a lullaby, offered Riley a cup of chamomile tea as they sat down. "Keanu gave me a general overview," she said. "We'll move at your pace." Riley nodded, clutching the file folder Celeste had left behind. "I just want to know what happened. My mom left when I was 6. I was told it was abandonment, but I know now that wasn't the whole story." Laurel listened without interruption as Riley explained the discovery of the safe deposit letters, the revelations about her father's abuse, and the emotional weight of reading her mother's final wishes. When she finished, Laurel leaned back with a quiet sigh. "I believe we can petition for access to the family court records. It's not guaranteed, but given your age now and the circumstances, a judge might agree to unseal them, especially if there's reason to believe the files contain details critical to your identity or mental health." "What kind of things would be in there?" Riley asked. "Testimonies, custody evaluations, protective orders, possibly psychological evaluations if there were concerns raised. If your mother filed anything official, this is where it would be." Riley looked down at her hands. And if nothing's there, then we'll know, Laurel said kindly. That's something too. Riley turned toward Keanu. You sure I should do this? You don't owe the past anything, he said. But if it helps you feel whole, then it's worth it. So they signed the paperwork. Laurel said it might take weeks, maybe months. Riley wasn't sure how she'd handle the waiting. But this time, she wasn't doing it in the dark. She wasn't alone anymore. That evening, Riley walked back to the Bluebird Cafe to pick up her last paycheck. She wasn't sure if she'd return there again. Something had shifted inside her. She was no longer the woman who served eggs and coffee while wondering why she was never enough. Now, she was someone asking the hard questions. Someone brave enough to look at pain and say, I want to understand you. Before leaving the diner, she paused outside booth 9. It was empty now, a small vase of plastic daisies in the center. But that morning still echoed. Keanu's quiet presence, the photo, the way everything had cracked open with one unexpected moment. Her life wasn't healed, not yet, but she was no longer chasing the past. She was meeting it face to face. And in a quiet children's library across town, her mother's name stood tall, not just in ink or memory, but in the voices of children learning to read, laughing, asking questions, turning pages. That was the real legacy. Not the loss, not the pain, but the love that never left. The envelope sat on the counter like a sealed truth, heavier than its weight suggested. Riley stared at it for a long time before opening it. Her hands trembled slightly as she peeled back the paper, revealing the court records she had requested. A 20-year-old proceeding buried beneath red tape and silence. Keanu stood a few steps away, quietly respectful, his presence steady but unobtrusive. The first document was a mental health evaluation, her father's name at the top. She hadn't spoken it aloud in years. The report was clinical, full of phrases like delusional episodes, manic outbursts, and potential for harm. One section described him threatening a school administrator after a parent-teacher meeting. Another detailed how Celeste had requested a protective order, granted temporarily, then overturned when her own parents testified that he was just under stress. Riley's breath caught. Her grandmother had sworn they were keeping her safe, that Celeste had run off, but here it was, legal proof. Her mother hadn't abandoned her. She had been forced out, trapped between a dangerous man and a family more worried about appearances than safety. She kept reading. The second file was a court transcript. A custody petition, filed by Celeste, dismissed without prejudice. The judge's notes were scrawled in the margin. Petitioner's support system weak. Risk to child unclear. Recommend counseling. Celeste had come to court. She had tried, but no one listened. Riley's vision blurred. She blinked away tears and held the pages tighter, like they might dissolve if she let go. Every year she had spent wondering why she wasn't enough. Every night she had cried as a child, thinking she must have done something wrong. It had all been based on a lie told to her face by the people who were supposed to protect her. She turned to Keanu. She fought for me, she whispered. He nodded gently. She never stopped. Riley sat down in the booth at the back of the diner where they had laid out the files. She felt drained but also lit from within, like a pilot light had suddenly sparked to life in her chest. She traced her finger over Celeste's signature at the bottom of one page. It was the same script she remembered from birthday cards as a kid. Elegant, slanted, always signed with love. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the diner faded into the background. Silverware clinking, a soft hum of conversation. Riley wasn't just holding legal documents. She was holding her mother's last stand. A record of her courage that no one had ever shown her before. And now, after all this time, she finally knew the truth. Keanu reached across the table and gently slid the remaining stack of documents toward her. Riley hesitated, then unfolded the next sheet. It was a letter from a court-appointed child psychologist. Dated just weeks before her mother disappeared, the letter expressed concern for Celeste's emotional exhaustion, but also praised her for her consistent parenting and genuine affection for Riley. A single line stood out. The petitioner appears deeply committed to her daughter's well-being, even in the face of overwhelming family pressure. Riley's throat tightened. She looked up at Keanu. They made her feel like she didn't have a choice, didn't they? He nodded solemnly. That's what it looks like. She was cornered. No protection from the court, no help from her family, only escape. I used to think she left because she didn't love me enough, Riley said, her voice breaking. But it wasn't that. It was the opposite. Keanu didn't speak right away. He gave her time to sit with the realization. Outside the diner window, the late afternoon light had turned golden. It filtered through the glass like warmth seeping into a long frozen room. I hated her for so long, Riley whispered. Not in the way you hate a stranger. In the way you hate someone you used to love more than anything. Keanu rested his arms on the table. You were a child. You were grieving a person who vanished without explanation. You blamed the only one who wasn't there to defend herself. She let out a shaky breath. And they just let me think that. My grandparents, they let me grow up believing she was selfish, unstable, just gone. Keanu's gaze was steady, not judgmental. Sometimes people rewrite the past to protect themselves, but it doesn't make it any less cruel. Riley wiped her face with her sleeve. She wasn't sure when the tears had started again. It didn't matter. The grief wasn't just for the years lost. It was for the mother she could have known, for the story she had been denied, and for the version of herself that might have existed if someone had just told her the truth. There's one more file, Keanu said gently. He slid it toward her. It was thinner than the others, just a single-page court summary. Riley picked it up and read it slowly. Petitioner withdrew from subsequent proceedings, no further contact with this court. Her mother had stopped fighting. Riley closed her eyes. She gave up. Keanu shook his head. She let go because no one would help her. That's not the same as giving up. But she left me. She'd left them. She never stopped writing to you. Riley stared down at the court documents spread across the table. The legal jargon, the cold signatures, the absence of justice. Then she thought of the letters from the safety deposit box, the handwritten pages full of warmth, longing, hope. That's where her mother had told the real story, not to the courts, but to her. And Riley had heard her. Here is part 1 of section 12, The Reunion Nobody Saw Coming. Word count 512/1200. The morning rush had come and gone, and the Bluebird Cafe was quiet again. Riley was wiping down the counter, half listening to the soft hum of the ceiling fan, when the bell above the door jingled. She glanced up, expecting a regular, maybe Mrs. Koenig with her crossword, or Frank, who ordered rye toast and never left a tip. But the woman who stepped in wasn't familiar at all. She looked to be in her late 50s, tall and elegant in a long gray coat, with gentle eyes and dark hair swept back in a simple clip. She paused just inside the doorway, scanning the cafe as though she were searching for something or someone. "Can I help you?" Riley asked, stepping out from behind the counter. The woman's eyes locked onto hers. There was a flicker of recognition there, something Riley couldn't quite place, until the woman smiled, warm and aching, and said softly, "You must be Riley." Riley froze. "Yes, I'm Riley Ward." The woman took a breath, her hands trembling slightly as she opened her purse and pulled out a folded envelope. "My name is Helen. I'm your aunt, your mother's sister." The room tilted. Just a little. "My mother didn't have a sister," Riley said, her voice sharp with instinctive doubt. But even as she said it, something in Helen's face stopped her. There was a resemblance, not perfect, but real, around the eyes, the shape of her chin. "I know this is unexpected," Helen said quickly, "but I've been trying to find you for months. I saw the reading room Keanu funded, the plaque. It had her name on it. I contacted the library and asked about him. I found out he'd been to a fundraiser. It took some digging, but eventually I found your name." Riley's heart was pounding now. "Why now? After all these years? I didn't know where to find you. Celeste, your mom, she asked me not to reach out when she disappeared. She was trying to protect you. But when I saw her name again, when I realized someone still remembered her, I couldn't stay quiet anymore." She handed Riley the envelope. It was worn, the paper soft and fraying at the edges. Inside were photographs. The first one showed Celeste older than Riley had ever imagined her, maybe mid-40s, her hair streaked with gray, her smile still full of light. She was standing in front of a modest building with a sign that read, "Haven House, Women's Shelter." Her arm was around a young woman holding a baby. They both looked like they adored her. "She lived there?" Riley asked, her voice barely a whisper. Helen nodded. "She didn't just live there. She worked there for the last 10 years of her life." Riley stared at the image, her fingers trembling. Her mother hadn't vanished into nothing. She'd spent her years helping women and children. She'd made a life, however quiet, filled with purpose. And all this time, Riley had pictured her gone, or worse. Keanu's voice echoed in her memory. "She changed my life. I never forgot her." Riley blinked fast, but the tears came anyway. Helen reached across the table, placing her hand gently over Riley's. "She carried you in her heart, Riley. Every day. I can't tell you how many nights she cried, wondering if you were safe, if you hated her. She used to write you letters, and then burn them because she was afraid someone might find them and use them against her." Riley couldn't speak. Her throat was too tight. Her chest felt hollow and full at the same time. "She was proud of you," Helen continued, her own eyes brimming now. "Even though she couldn't be with you, she kept track. I helped where I could. Birthdays, milestones. She always knew. She just couldn't reach out. She thought it would only put you in danger again." Riley pressed the photographs against her chest, trying to breathe through the swell of grief and something else. Relief? Validation? The fear that had haunted her entire life, that she wasn't worth staying for, was beginning to lift. Not all at once, but enough. Helen opened her bag again and took out a small bound notebook. "This is her final journal. She gave it to me before she passed. Told me to find you when the time was right." Riley reached for it slowly, as if touching it too fast might make it disappear. The cover was soft leather, cracked at the edges, and her mother's initials were faintly etched on the bottom right corner. CW. Inside, the first page was dated 3 months before Celeste died. Her handwriting was as familiar as Riley's own, each loop and curve unlocking something buried deep. "I think about her every day. I wonder if she looks like me, if she likes books, if she laughs at silly things like she used to when she was little and we'd play library on the floor. I wonder if she remembers how I braided her hair." Riley blinked through the blur in her eyes. She flipped another page, then another. Every entry was a window into her mother's heart, a woman who had been forced to live in the shadows, but had never once stopped loving her child. Helen gave her time, waiting patiently, until Riley finally looked up. "How did she die?" "Peacefully," Helen said. "Cancer. She didn't suffer long, and she wasn't alone." Riley swallowed hard. "Did she ever try to come back?" Helen nodded slowly. "Many times. But your grandmother, she didn't want her around. There was a lot of shame in the family about the court proceedings, about what happened with your father. Celeste felt she had no choice but to stay away. But that didn't mean she gave up." Riley set the journal down, her hand still resting on its cover. I was told she abandoned me, that she just walked away. Helen's expression softened. I know, but that's not the truth. She made an impossible choice, one most people wouldn't have had the strength to make. Riley closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the years press down and then slowly lift. The truth didn't change what had happened, but it gave her a story she could finally live with. One where her mother wasn't a ghost, but a woman who had fought in her own quiet way to protect her daughter. Riley stood on the diner's back steps during her break, the sun dipping low behind the row of brownstones across the street. The photo of her mother had never left her thoughts. It lingered like a whisper at the edge of every breath, haunting her through sleepless nights and long shifts. She hadn't seen Keanu since that day at the reading room. He had promised he'd be in touch, and just as promised, he returned, quietly, without ceremony, on a Thursday afternoon when the lunch crowd was light and the air still carried the warmth of early fall. He came in with no entourage, no fanfare, just that calm presence that filled the room without trying. Riley noticed him instantly, heart leaping even as she wiped her hands on her apron and tried to act normal. But this time, he wasn't there to sit. He walked straight to the counter, holding something gently in his hand, a small worn photograph. I've been thinking about this, he said, not wasting time on pleasantries. And I think it's time. He held out the photo. Riley stared at it. It was the same one she'd seen that first morning, the one that had torn open a world she thought she'd buried. Her mother, Celeste, smiling at the camera with sunlight in her hair. It looked like a still from a life Riley never got to live. I can't take that, she said softly, backing away without realizing it. It's been yours for years. Keanu looked at the photograph, his eyes dimmed with a kind of gentle resignation. It doesn't belong to me, he said. I carried it because I couldn't forget her, because she mattered. But it's not mine to carry anymore. Riley swallowed hard. You kept it all this time. He nodded. I never knew why it felt important. I just knew it was. Her fingers trembled as she reached out and took the photo from his hand. The texture of the paper, the warmth still lingering from his palm. It all made it real in a way that 1,000 memories never had. She stared at her mother's face. It's like she's looking right at me, she whispered. She is, Keanu said. And now, when you carry this, it's not about what was lost. It's about what you've reclaimed. Riley stood silent for a moment, then slowly pulled her wallet from her apron pocket. She opened it, removing an old loyalty punch card she'd never bothered to fill, and slid the photo into the empty space behind her eyes. It fit perfectly. She closed the wallet with both hands, feeling a small but profound shift in her chest, like a weight transferring from sorrow to strength. I've spent most of my life thinking she left me because I wasn't enough, Riley said, her voice just above a whisper. Even after everything we've uncovered, part of me still believes it sometimes. She didn't leave because of you, Keanu said firmly. She left because she was protecting you. That doesn't erase the pain, but it changes what the pain means. Riley nodded slowly, her fingers still closed around the wallet. I used to think I had to forget her to survive. That remembering just made things worse. And now, he asked gently, now I think remembering is how I heal. Keanu stayed for coffee, and Riley sat across from him in the quiet booth near the back, away from the windows and the hum of conversation. It felt like time folded inward there, as if the chaos of the world had paused just long enough to let them breathe. They didn't speak much at first. Some silences carry more meaning than words ever could. After a while, Riley glanced down at her wallet again, now heavier with the truth it carried. You know what's strange, she said. I've had this wallet since I was 16. It was a gift from my grandmother. I've replaced everything in it at least once, except for the actual wallet. I never knew why I kept it. Keanu gave her a knowing look. Some things are waiting for what they were meant to carry. Riley let that sink in. The truth had come in fragments, letters, records, stories, and now this photograph was the final piece that brought it all home. For the first time, the image of her mother no longer felt like a stranger's ghost. It was her legacy, her beginning. She turned to Keanu, studying his expression. There was something different about him now, a lightness, as if passing the photo had lifted a burden he didn't realize he'd been carrying. "You've done a lot more than I expected," she said. "I didn't plan to," he replied. "I just followed where the truth led. You could have walked away." "I almost did," he admitted. "But I saw your eyes that day in the diner, and something told me that wasn't the end of the story." Riley leaned forward, her voice softer. "You said my mom changed your life. How?" Keanu looked down at the table for a long moment before answering. "She believed in people no one else noticed. That includes who I was back then. Just a nobody drifting through LA, unsure of myself, of anything. She made me feel like I had something to offer, not because of what I did, but because of who I was." He looked up. "There aren't many people in life who see you like that and expect nothing in return." Riley's throat tightened. "She did that for me too. I just didn't remember until recently." "She never stopped loving you," he said. "That much is clear." They sat quietly again, and Riley felt tears welling up, but they were different this time. Not grief, not confusion, just gratitude. A quiet, aching kind of gratitude that came with finally knowing she hadn't been abandoned, but protected. "I've spent so many years blaming her," Riley said. "Blaming myself, thinking if I had just been better somehow, maybe she would have stayed." Keanu reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "You were just a child. You were never the reason for what happened. You were the reason she survived as long as she did." Riley nodded, wiping her cheek. "I think I needed to hear that more than I knew." He let go of her hand and leaned back. "What you do with the truth now, that's up to you. But I have a feeling your mother would want you to live boldly, to create something beautiful from all this pain." Riley smiled through her tears. "I think I will." The cassette tape was old, the kind with a clear plastic casing and faded labels from another time. Riley held it in her hand like it was a fragile artifact. Helen had found it tucked inside a manila envelope at the shelter's old storage archive, labeled in Celeste's handwriting, "For Riley. If someday she finds me." It was nearly sunset when Riley arrived at Keanu's apartment. He opened the door quietly, as if he already knew the weight she carried. Without saying much, he led her to the living room, where he'd set up a small cassette player on the coffee table. The blinds were half closed, letting streaks of golden light filter through, bathing the room in a warm hush. Riley didn't sit right away. She stood there, the tape in her palm, staring at it like it might evaporate if she blinked. Keanu didn't rush her. He simply watched from the armchair, patient, respectful, present. She finally knelt by the cassette player and inserted the tape. Her hands trembled. The tape clicked into place with a soft mechanical snap. Then she pressed play. There was a gentle static at first, then a voice. "Hi, Riley," the voice said softly. Riley's breath hitched. She hadn't heard that voice since she was 6 years old. It was unmistakable. Softer now, older, but filled with the same delicate cadence that used to read her bedtime stories. "If you're listening to this, I guess it means you found something. Maybe you found him. Maybe you found me in a way. I don't know what life handed you, baby girl. I only know what I prayed for." Riley sat slowly on the edge of the couch, her hand covering her mouth. Her other hand gripped her knees so tightly her knuckles turned white. "I never stopped loving you," the tape continued. "Not for 1 second, not through the silence, not through the years. I had to go because it wasn't safe, Riley. You were too little to understand, and that haunts me. But your father wasn't well, and I was told I'd never win if I stayed and fought. Keanu remained across the room. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He knew this moment belonged to Riley and Riley alone. His presence was steady, like a lighthouse that didn't intrude on the storm, but simply stood there in case someone needed to find the shore. I tried writing letters, the voice on the tape continued. So many. I kept them all, hoping maybe one day someone would put the pieces together. You see, I never wanted to disappear. I only wanted you to live without fear. Riley blinked hard, her throat tightening. Her whole body seemed to be suspended between past and present, between loss and discovery. The tape crackled gently as Celeste continued. I thought maybe one day if you ever met Keanu again, he might help you. He always had a good heart. He reminded me that not all men hurt people, that some choose kindness. I hope he was still that man when you met him. Riley glanced at Keanu. He met her eyes. No smile, just a shared ache, a knowing, a silent vow that he would carry her through this, however she needed. Celeste's voice wavered on the tape. I don't know how long I have. Some days are harder than others. But if this reaches you, Riley, if this voice finds your ears, I want you to know something as true as the sky. Riley held her breath. I am proud of you. I am with you. I love you. Always. The room was still except for the low hum of the cassette player and the rhythmic flutter of the tape reel spinning. Celeste's voice paused, as if searching for the right words, across time. I remember the last night I tucked you in, she said. You were wearing that little pink pajama set with the clouds. You asked me if dreams were real. I told you they could be if you held on tight enough. And then, when you closed your eyes, I just sat there, watching you breathe, memorizing everything. Riley clenched her jaw, her shoulders trembling under the weight of it. Her tears weren't loud, but they came steadily, soaking the sleeves of the sweater she'd pulled over her hands. The kind of tears that didn't ask for comfort, only release. I wanted more time, Celeste whispered. More mornings, more birthdays, more first days of school. But wanting wasn't enough. I was afraid. Not just of what your father might do, but of what I might become if I stayed. And I didn't want you to grow up in fear. I didn't want you to think silence was love, or that survival meant staying quiet. Keanu shifted slightly in his seat. He didn't look away, but he didn't move toward her either. He was giving Riley something few people could offer: uninterrupted space to grieve. I hope you grew up strong, the voice continued. I hope you found kindness in someone's eyes. I hope you learned how to stand up for yourself and for others. But if you didn't, that's okay too. You're still enough, just as you are. Riley's face crumpled, and she lowered her head, hands clasped tight as if holding herself together. The cassette player clicked softly as it reached the midpoint of the tape, and Celeste's voice resumed with a lighter tone. There's something I want to tell you about Keanu, she said. He volunteered with us when no one else would, back before he was famous, before the world knew his name. He came in with that soft voice and those thoughtful eyes, and he read to kids like they were the most important people in the world. I think he knew what it felt like to be invisible. Maybe that's why he never looked away from the ones others forgot. Riley looked up then. Her eyes, swollen and wet, flicked briefly toward Keanu again. His head was bowed, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped loosely together. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't crying, but his silence said everything. Your mother was brave, Celeste added quietly, but she was also broken. I was both. And I want you to know that being broken doesn't mean you failed. It just means you're human. The final words came slowly, like Celeste was trying to hold onto them too. If this voice finds you, Riley, I hope it fills a hole that nothing else could. I hope you forgive me. And I hope you carry forward with light in your step, and peace in your heart. Because you were never abandoned. You were always, always loved. The tape hissed at the end, a soft crackle where words used to be. Riley didn't move for a long time. She let the silence soak in, thick with memory and meaning. Finally, Keanu stood. He crossed the room and sat beside her, not touching her, just close enough that she could feel he was there. She turned her face slightly toward him, the cassette still turning in her mind, and whispered, "I needed this more than I knew." The spring morning broke quietly, golden light pouring through the stained glass windows of the newly renovated reading hall in Bedford-Stuyvesant. The brick building had once been a forgotten school annex, but now bore a gleaming brass plaque, the Celeste Ward Literacy Center, for every child left behind. Inside, folding chairs lined the modest room. Colorful children's books were stacked along wooden shelves, their spines glowing like promises. Paper butterflies hung from the ceiling, each one hand-cut by local kids and volunteers. Riley stood near the front, nervously straightening a stack of donor brochures. She wore a soft blue dress and her mother's old charm bracelet, the one she had discovered in the safe deposit box months earlier. Each charm clicked gently against the other, as if whispering memories. She hadn't slept the night before, not because of nerves, but because she kept thinking about how far she had come. A year ago, she was pouring coffee in a corner diner, grieving a mother she believed had disappeared without a word. Now, she stood at the helm of a nonprofit born from that very silence. Ellie approached from behind and squeezed her shoulder. "You okay?" Riley nodded, eyes glistening. I didn't think this day would ever come." Ellie smiled. "You made it come." There were dozens of familiar faces filtering in. Former teachers, local volunteers, bookstore owners, a few city council members. But Riley kept scanning the crowd for just one person. And then he entered. Keanu walked in quietly, dressed simply in a dark blazer, jeans, and a soft expression that hadn't changed since the first morning he sat at booth 9. He nodded at the room, but his eyes found Riley's instantly. She gave him a grateful smile. He took a seat in the third row without a word, as if to say, "This is your moment." The ceremony began with a young librarian introducing the mission of the nonprofit to provide books, mentorship, and safe creative spaces to children in underserved neighborhoods. She recited a poem by Maya Angelou, and the room fell into reverent silence. Then it was Riley's turn. She stepped up to the podium, took a deep breath, and looked out at the people gathered. Her voice shook slightly at first, but strengthened with each word. "I spent most of my life asking questions I thought would never be answered," she began. "Why did my mother leave? Did she ever think of me? Was I not enough?" She paused, gripping the edge of the podium. But this year, something incredible happened. A stranger walked into the diner where I worked. He dropped a photo of the woman I'd been mourning since I was 6. And that photo changed everything. She turned slightly toward Keanu. The stranger became a friend, a guide, a quiet witness to a story I didn't know I was still writing. People leaned forward, visibly moved. Riley continued. "What I learned through letters, recordings, and the voices of those who remembered my mother is that she never stopped loving me. She didn't vanish. She was erased, silenced by fear, by pressure, by a system that failed her, but not anymore." Tears welled up in several eyes across the room. I named this center after her not just because she taught me how to read, but because she taught me, even in absence, how to see people who are overlooked, children like I was, quiet, confused, and waiting for someone to reach out. She lifted a small velvet box from beneath the podium and opened it. Inside the box was a gold fountain pen, slightly tarnished but lovingly preserved. "This belonged to my mother," Riley said. "She used it to write every letter she was never allowed to send, every word she was too afraid to say out loud. She once told a friend, 'If I can't speak my truth, Maybe I can help a child learn to speak theirs." She closed the box softly, then set it down. "That's what this place is for. Every book here, every corner of this room, every whispered story during reading hour. It's for the kids whose voices haven't found their shape yet." Riley took a breath, the kind that cleanses the soul. "I owe this moment to many people. But one person helped me find the strength to uncover what was buried, to listen when it hurt, and to believe in the healing that comes when the truth finally sees light." She turned her gaze to Keanu again. "Sometimes the people who show up late," she said gently, "are the ones who help you rewrite the ending." The room held its breath. And then quiet applause swelled into a standing ovation. Keanu didn't stand right away. He simply looked down, moved in a way that words couldn't touch. But when he finally rose, he gave Riley a nod so small and solemn, it said everything. Not pride, not approval, just understanding. Later that afternoon, after the crowd had thinned and laughter echoed from a book-themed craft table near the window, Riley sat beside Keanu in the hallway lined with donor plaques. He held a cup of lemon tea she'd made him. "This place," he said, looking around, "it feels like her." "I hope so," Riley said softly. "She'd be proud," he added. "Of you. I wish she could see it." "He does," Keanu said, almost inaudibly. They sat in silence for a while. Riley traced her fingers along the edge of a carved wooden bench. "It's strange. For years I thought pain was permanent, like a fact you just live with. But lately I think maybe pain just asks to be acknowledged. That once you name it, you're not carrying it alone anymore." Keanu looked at her thoughtfully. "That's how stories work," he said. "They hold what we can't." Riley turned to him, her eyes bright. "You were a big part of this story." He gave a soft shrug. "I just returned a photo." "No," Riley said. "You returned a mother." Keanu smiled but said nothing more. Outside, the afternoon light shifted, casting warm shadows along the hallway walls. Somewhere nearby, a child's laughter rang out. Light, unguarded, full of wonder. And for the first time in a long time, Riley didn't feel like a girl searching. She felt like a woman continuing, carrying something forward, not as a burden, but as a legacy. She looked down at her charm bracelet and then toward the room filled with books and new beginnings. The silence between her and Keanu was no longer heavy. It was peace. The morning sun filtered softly through the windows of the literacy center. Riley stood quietly in the main hallway, holding the worn photograph of her mother that had once lived in someone else's wallet. Today, it belonged to the building. A framed copy had been mounted on the central wall, just above a quote that read, "Truth doesn't erase pain, but it gives you power." Beneath the glass, flowers were tucked into a small basket. Some were real. Some were hand-drawn by children. Riley had been standing there longer than she realized. Her fingers brushed the edge of the photo frame. For a moment, her mother's voice echoed in her head. Not the literal cassette recording from months ago, but something deeper. A feeling. The warmth of arms wrapped around her from long ago, the scent of vanilla from bedtime stories. The certainty of being loved, even in silence. Behind her, soft footsteps approached. She didn't turn around. "You okay?" Keanu asked gently. Riley nodded once, eyes still on the photo. "I don't want people to just remember her as someone who vanished. I want them to remember what she stood for." Keanu didn't answer right away. His presence, as always, felt steady. He stood next to her, hands in the pockets of his jacket. "You've already done that. You built something real." That's what she would have wanted. There was a quiet beat before Riley turned toward him. "You were part of this too. You carried her memory longer than anyone. You honored her before I even knew who she was." Keanu looked away almost bashfully. "I was just a kid when I met her, and she made me believe I could be more than who I was. She gave me Stillness. Hope. Like, I wasn't just another guy trying to figure himself out. Riley smiled. That's how she made me feel too, even when she was gone. They stood in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Just outside the building, volunteers were finishing the morning setup. Parents and children would arrive soon for the day's programs, story circles, tutoring, and a community book drive that Riley had helped organize. She stepped forward and placed a small note under the photo. Just 2 lines. For the woman who never stopped loving me. For the man who helped me believe her. Keanu glanced at the words, then back at Riley. He didn't say anything, just gave a soft nod of acknowledgement. Later that afternoon, as the crowd gathered for the official dedication ceremony, Keanu was asked if he'd be willing to say a few words. He didn't prepare a speech. He never did. But when the mic was passed to him and the room quieted, he took a long breath and began. Sometimes, Keanu said, his voice quiet but firm, what someone leaves behind is more powerful than their presence. The room was still. Even the fidgeting children fell silent. Keanu's eyes scanned the faces in front of him. Volunteers, parents, teachers. Riley, standing near the back, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. A framed photo of Celeste watched from the wall behind her. A photo, a truth, a daughter's voice, Keanu continued. Celeste wasn't famous, she wasn't rich, but she changed my life. Not because of anything dramatic or loud, but because she saw me when I didn't know how to see myself. A ripple of emotion moved through the room. Keanu's tone never wavered, but his eyes grew misty. We think sometimes that legacy means having your name on buildings or in books. But legacy is what happens when one person dares to believe in another, when someone leaves behind something kind, something true. Celeste did that, for me, for Riley, and now, for all of you. He paused. And maybe for someone else too, someone out there listening. Maybe someone changed you, maybe they didn't know it, maybe you never told them. He looked directly into the camera now, speaking to the viewer with gentle urgency. If someone in your life changed you without ever knowing, tell us in the comments. Write their name, share their story, because remembering them out loud matters. He paused again, this time letting the silence linger. Then he added with a quiet smile, and while you're here, what story would you like to see next? The mic clicked softly as he passed it off, stepping away from the podium and moving to stand beside Riley. The two of them watched as a group of children took the stage and began reading lines from a children's book Celeste had once recommended in her shelter. Their voices rose with joy, laughter, stumbles, and small triumphs. And there, framed above them, the photo of Celeste remained, smiling softly, silently, holding the space she had once filled in life. Later that evening, after the crowd dispersed and the lights dimmed, Riley returned alone to the front hallway. She looked at the wall again, now filled with drawings from the day's events. Beside her mother's photo, she gently taped one final note from the dedication ceremony. It read, "A story that ended too soon, found a new beginning." She stepped back, letting the quiet wrap around her. Outside, the streetlights blinked on, and the city moved forward. But here, in this space of pages and echoes and memory, something sacred had taken root. Riley placed her hand on the photo once more, this time not with longing, but with peace. A new legacy had begun.